All right, well, welcome everyone to ADUs, a green infill housing solution right in your backyard. This course is approved for 1 hour in Con Ed, including today the LEED accredited professional homes, as well as AIA Health, Welfare, and Safety, which may make it applicable to your state-based design or contractor license. I know those are renewing in Michigan here shortly. Today I will be your moderator. My name is Brett Little, and I am the executive director here at the nonprofit, the GreenHome Institute. Today we're going to be learning about accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, and how they fit in with the LEED BD+C V4 through market exploration, zoning barriers, and compact development. And we want to say real quick a huge thanks to our sponsor, Mitsubishi Electric. Mitsubishi provides all your heating, cooling, and filtration needs in one system. Today's low-load homes require right-sized equipment that most systems cannot meet, especially gas-fired. Mitsubishi has low-load, high-efficient heat pumps that dehumidify and cool in the summer and work in reverse to heat in the winter. Going ductless reduces costs and makes it easier to meet ENERGY Star 3 and LEED for Home certification. Ductless mini splits can now be hidden in many different ways to meet your client's needs, and ducted systems can be used as well. Ducted systems are hidden behind the walls to ensure a beautiful space and can be retrofitted in place of an existing furnace in a single or multi-family project. Hyperheat ensures efficient heating delivery down to -13 degrees, and then backup strip heaters can kick in during the very rare but coldest of cold days. Each room of a house can be customized comfort while still being all electric and energy efficient for clients with different needs and only heat or cool rooms that need it. And just lately, if you're trying to make that transition, but your clients want to use dual fuel, brand new products that have just come out allow Mitsubishi to integrate with existing or brand new gas-fired furnaces, many different types. So check that out over at MitsubishiComfort.com. And also a huge thanks to Rheem, introducing the Rheem Prestige, an energy-efficient, quiet, and all-electric hybrid heat pump water heater. The future of water heating is here. 50, 65, or 80 gallons, anywhere from up to 350% to 377% energy efficiency. 10-year warranty, quieter than the typical heat pumps with some utility incentives, as well as leak detection, smart prevention that will notify your client's cell phone when or if there is a leak to help shut it down and prevent that. Check it out over at rheem.com/hybrid savings. All right. Well, I want to welcome our presenter today, Cole Peterson. He's an ADU expert based in Portland, Oregon, who has helped catalyze the exponential growth of ADUs in Portland over the last decade through ADU advocacy, education, consulting, policy work, and entrepreneurship. He is the author of the Backdoor Revolution, the definitive guide to ADU development, and the owner of Caravan, the tiny house hotel, the first tiny house hotel in the world, and organizer of Portland's popular ADU tour. He consults with homeowners about their ADUs on their property and teaches ADU classes for homeowners and for real estate agents in Oregon, Washington, California. He helps edit and manage AccessoryDwellings.org and BuildingADU.com, and he is also the director of ADU Academy. So with that, Cole, welcome. Thank you for joining us, and please do take it away.
Thanks, Brett. All right, I'm just getting the presentation pulled up here. And yeah, thanks so much for inviting me to talk today. This is this is a good synthesis of precisely why I am passionate about ADUs. I'm looking at kind of the energy efficiency and kind of high performance nature of ADUs, and so I'm pleased to be able to kind of just go over these ideas with people in a broader way so that people can consider whether ADUs might be something they want to start to focus on professionally because of all the inherent kind of green benefits associated with them. I guess I'm gonna go through this presentation, I would encourage you to chime in with questions through the chat box, and Brett will interrupt me and ask them throughout, and that's totally fine. And I'm kind of going to stick to more or less some of these high performance elements of ADUs, but I recognize that there might be other questions that are tangential to those particular topics, such as utility connections and HVAC systems that are being used. And I would encourage you to chime in with questions that aren't necessarily, we're not necessarily going to dedicate slides to. So just to give a little bit more of a introduction to myself, I built a detached new construction high performance ADU in 2010 in Northeast Portland. And my motivation for doing so was I was looking for a financially sustainable form of housing for myself. So I was looking at a variety of different options at that time, and including living in a co-housing community and living in a tiny house on wheels. And so I explored a lot of different options, but ultimately figured out that, hey, there's this little hack of the single family residential code that allows you to put a small house in your backyard in Portland. And the ADUs were just kind of getting known at the time in Portland. It was kind of before the curve of popularity, which we'll be talking about in a minute. So there wasn't any information on the web or really much book information about ADUs at that point, but nonetheless, I careened my way through the development process and ended up building a high performance ADU. And meanwhile, I was taking this course at a local organization called Earth Advantage it was called the Sustainable Homes Professional Course. I was learning a lot about green building technologies and kind of enacting those best practices as I was going through the design development process of that ADU. Ultimately ended up building the ADU, finishing it in 2011, moved into the ADU with my wife and rented out the primary house. And lo and behold, the rental income from the primary house covered the mortgage and then some. So within a period of roughly 4 years, I was not only not paying any mortgage each month, but my ADU had, in addition, above and beyond the mortgage being covered by the rental income from the primary house, it had also paid down the cost of development in a period of roughly 4 years. So I built this dream house, or what was to me a dream house, high performance, and lived in it for free, and it paid for itself in 4 years. And so that's really the story that kind of helped me realize this is a really good solution, financially, and a really good solution from kind of a greenhouse gas reductions perspective, which is what we'll talk about today. So here I am 10 years later talking about essentially, how to go about building ADUs and helping individuals, governments, and different kind of professionals learn about ADUs and how they can get involved in getting more of them built. So I'll move on to the next slide. There's a lot more that has transpired in the last 10 years since I started to build my ADU. Now ADUs have become a really big topic of conversation, at least on the West Coast, and I can't say that's necessarily true throughout the whole country, but it's definitely true on the West Coast and more and more on the East Coast. And then in some cities in the Midwest as well. So we're definitely seeing ADUs being talked about in discourse, primarily in the context of affordable housing. And so I'm not going to talk about the kind of the relationship between ADUs and affordable housing today, but needless to say, from a policy perspective, that's what's really driving the conversation in getting governments interested in reducing the regulatory barriers to ADU development. But today we're going to be focusing on kind of the energy, the high performance nature of ADUs. Okay, so just to give a little bit of preliminary context for ADUs, what they are. I realize that people might know what they are already, but I'm going to give a deeper definition than perhaps what you've been exposed to previously. So ADUs are secondary housing units on single family lots, which is a pretty simple definition at first blush, but it's actually pretty complex. So they are secondary. They are not third or fourth units typically. Most codes in the United States allow for accessory dwelling units to be a second housing unit on a single family lot. And if you had like a 3 or 4 unit development, that would be called a triplex or fourplex, and these are not those. It's really just when you have a primary residential dwelling, and you have a secondary dwelling on that lot. And that secondary dwelling is diminutive architecturally or secondary to the primary dwelling. It's not the same size as the primary dwelling. It's by regulatory design, it's intended to be small, so diminutive. It is on a single family residential lot. Actually, ADUs aren't always on single family residential lots. They can be on other zoned lots. So you could have a primary residential unit on a commercially zoned piece of property and have an ADU subservient to that. But typically we see residential dwellings on single family residential lots. So it's fair to say ADUs are on single family residential lots, generally speaking. And the third part of that is that it's a housing unit, secondary housing unit, a single family lot. Housing unit is a space with independent living space, sanitation space, cooking space, and sleeping space. And so if we look at these different structural forms up here on the page, we see in the upper left-hand corner a garage conversion ADU. Upper right-hand corner, we see an ADU above a garage. Lower left-hand corner, we see a detached new construction ADU. And lower right-hand corner, we see a basement conversion ADU. So I'm going to talk about these 4 structural forms for a moment here. And just, again, I'm going to kind of focus this presentation more on the energy impacts than I normally do. Basement conversions are actually going to be the most efficient types of ADUs in the sense that they are sharing walls. So it's almost like a little small multifamily construction unit here. Detached new construction has the opportunity to do high performance new construction. It's relatively easy to hit kind of high performance standards on new construction as it would be with any new single family residential construction unit. And then a garage conversion has some inherent benefits in terms of material conservation. You're not putting waste into the landfill, but it's a little bit more challenging to do a high performance garage conversion necessarily. But I think there's arguments to be made for any of these different types of structural forms. But that's honestly not going to be what's driving people's motivations for building ADUs, rather meaning the energy benefits. Rather, it's going to be what's going to be practical on their lot to do. But I guess my point here is that regardless of what structural form the ADU ends up taking, any of these forms are going to have potential opportunities to make them pretty high performance in a variety of different ways, depending on how you look at it. And then ADUs, this is an ADU above a garage. In terms of different, the breakdown of what we see in the or I should say in Portland anyway, in terms of percentage, roughly 50 to 60% of ADUs are detached new construction. Roughly 25% are garage conversion or ADUs above a garage, somehow ADUs associated with structurally a garage, and roughly 25% are basement conversion ADUs. I say that because it's helpful to give some context as far as what degree of popularity these different structural forms have, in part because some jurisdictions will theoretically allow certain types of ADUs, but ban other types of ADUs. They might say, okay, you can do an attached internal conversion ADU, but you can't do new construction, or you can do new construction, but you can't do an internal conversion, or we require that you provide off-street parking if you build an ADU. Therefore, you're going to see a an ADU above a garage because the property owner doesn't have space to build an off-street parking spot covered unless it's has an ADU above it. So this is a structural form you might see in that kind of code context. So the code is going to really drive the structural form in some cases, but if the code is agnostic, what we see in Portland might be representative of the kind of the natural predispositions of the market in terms of the structural form. So again, most of the ADUs, a slight majority are just detached new construction. Backyard cottages is the way to think about that. But the code might kind of drive the market towards internal conversions. So it kind of just depends on the code context, and in some communities they don't have basements. For example, a lot of Los Angeles doesn't have basements, and therefore you're not going to see basement conversions there, but you're going to see a heck of a lot of garage conversions because there's so many garages in LA. And so there's been thousands and thousands of ADU permits issued in the last 2 years for garage conversion ADUs. And as I mentioned, in other cities that have strict off-street parking requirements, you're going to see not garage conversions because, God forbid, you change car habitat to human habitat. Rather, you're going to see a tear down of an existing old garage like this and a new ADU put up above a garage. So the code is going to impact what types of structural forms are built, but above and beyond that, there's going to be the predispositions of the homeowner. For example, a homeowner might not want to have somebody living in their basement, and so they might want a detached new construction ADU. And the reason to build a basic conversion over a detached new construction ADU from a homeowner's perspective is the detached new construction ADU is going to cost a lot more, probably twice as much as a basement conversion ADU. So they might not want somebody living in their basement, but they might be economically compelled to consider that option in some cases over a detached new construction ADU. So it's not, again, it's not really energy benefits that are going to be driving a homeowner's thinking about these things, but rather kind of other factors, life factors.
Cole,
Yeah.
and maybe you're going to talk about this, so forgive me and feel free to skip it. But what about the sort of the movement of the fourth one that we see sometimes? Actually, more that I've seen is the sort of granny pod, where you sort of have a kind of connected, maybe like entrance room to a separate attached full ADU that typically you might have your parents move into. At least that's the sort of or the trendy term I hear. What are you seeing with those?
With attached bump out ADUs?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say, so let's talk about that a little bit. So this is an internal conversion ADU, which from a regulatory perspective is classified as quote unquote attached. What Brett has just inquired about is like an attached bump out, like new construction bump out ADU. What I see honestly is very few of those. Like that represents, I'd say, less than 5% of the market in Portland. And the reason I'm going to be referring to Portland above and beyond the fact that I'm live here and very familiar with it, and it's the leader in the country in terms of the market penetration of ADUs, is that we actually have statistically valid data set to talk about these different ADU typologies and trends occurring in Portland. So pardon me in advance for referring to Portland, but it's really the only place where we have statistically valid data and conclusions about ADU development trends. So I'm going to be referring to that. So with that preamble in mind, what we see in Portland is attached ADUs represent a pretty attached bump out. New construction ADUs represent a pretty small portion of ADUs. That's because most people who have the money are going to opt to do a detached new construction ADU. It's going to cost probably about the same or perhaps even a little bit more to do an attached bump out new construction ADU because you're going to be sharing a structural wall, having to mitigate lead-based paint, mitigate asbestos, potentially upgrade the foundation on the shared party wall. And all those things cost a little bit more than an average new construction detached would cost. Furthermore, you're going to get a little, potentially a little bit of sound transfer from unit A to unit B. So those are the reasons that people might not opt to do it. Now, if their lot doesn't have enough space for the unit to be detached, that would be one consideration, a reason that a homeowner might consider it. Secondly, if they want to have an internal connection between the two units because it's an aging parent and they want to be able to easily have the aging parent get access to the primary house, that's another motivation. And thirdly, if the code, and probably most importantly, if the code specifies that we allow ADUs, but they must be structurally attached to the primary house, that's another reason why you might see an attached bump out ADU. So the only reason I didn't mention it in this slide is because it represents a fairly small portion of the overall ADU housing stock in Portland. But like I said before, it's possible other jurisdictions that might be a more popular structural form relative to to what we see here. The other structural forms that I didn't mention are like attic conversions. For example, I've seen like one attic conversion out of, I don't know, 500 ADUs I've been in. So that's allowed, but very rare. So yeah.
Thanks for watching. Please continue to watch the next part of the session to complete the course and get your continuing education credits. Be sure to check out all of our courses available online that you can watch anytime and anywhere to pick up your CEUs. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube to get weekly updates and stay up to date on green building science courses, webinars, and home tours. Thanks again.